Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto number 1, chapter number 19, text number 38. So I guess I'll just read the verse, and there's no purport to this verse, but we'll have a discussion on it. And I'll maybe share my screen also. So the Sanskrit, I guess I just do it myself, and then everyone can follow along. Yachrotavyam atho japyam yatkartavyan ribhi prabho smartavyam bhajaniyam va bruhiyad va viparyayam. Translation by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. So this is Parikshit speaking to Sukadev Goswami. Please let me know what a man should hear, chant, remember, and worship, and also what he should not do. Please explain all this to me. We are reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, dear devotees, and we've come to practically the conclusion of Canto number 1. And before we discuss today's verse, I want to share with you something very, very interesting. That I think will get you thinking. For one moment, I just want all of us to reflect on, Krishna. Sorry, give me 1 second. For one moment, I just want us to try and reflect on the Bhagavatam and the Gita. For a few moments, I'm just going to give you a little bit of a comparison, because when you look at the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita, then what you're going to begin to see is that there is a great parallel between them. The Bhagavad Gita and the Srimad Bhagavatam both have an outer narrative. The outer narrative of the Gita is that Dhritarashtra is asking Sanjaya, Kimakur vata Sanjaya? What did my sons and the sons of Pandu, what did they do on the battlefield? And the conclusion of that whole thing at the end, Krishna says that wherever there is Krishna, there will always be victory. So basically, your sons are going to lose in the battle. So there's an outer narrative of the Bhagavad Gita, which is Dhritarashtra wondering what's happening on the battlefield. In the same way, there's an outer narrative of the Bhagavatam. And the outer narrative of the Bhagavatam is in the first canto. Parikshit gets cursed, and then he comes to the banks of the Ganga. And by the 12th canto, the bird, Takshaka, comes, and basically Parikshit leaves the world. So that's the outer narrative. Can you see both of the books have an outer narrative? But now what's very, very interesting is that both of the books also have an inner narrative. The inner narrative of the Bhagavad Gita is that Arjuna is asking Krishna, what is my dharma? What is my purpose? What is my meaning? Now I'm confused. And at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna gives the answer to that inner narrative when he says, Sarva dharman paritya, just give up all dharma and just surrender. In the same way, the Bhagavatam has an inner narrative. In the beginning, Parikshit is asking a question. And the verses that we're reading today, 39, and particularly the verse before 38, this kicks off the inner narrative of the Bhagavatam, because the question that's being posed is, what is the duty of someone who's about to die? And not just that, what's the duty of someone in all times, places, and circumstances? And the final verse of the Bhagavatam concludes that inner narrative when Sukadev says, Nama Sankirtanam Yasya Sarva Papa Pranashanam. You just have to engage in Nam Sankirtan, and you'll be freed from the influence. So can you begin to see how there's a parallel between the Gita and the Bhagavatam? In English, they have a saying, history repeats itself. So the way things usually happen in history, they repeat themselves. But now let me share you more parallels between the Bhagavatam and the Gita. The Bhagavatam and Gita both have a preface. Before the real conversation in both of these books even takes place, the beginning is we're just setting the scene. So if, for example, you look at chapter 1 of the Bhagavad Gita, then it's basically a preface, because all the chapter is about the armies on the battlefield. No dialogue is actually taking place yet. And similarly, if you look at Canto 1 of the Bhagavatam, then it's basically a preface. The conversation between Sukadeva and Parikshit hasn't even begun yet, but we're hearing about the events leading up to that conversation. So can you see how there's a parallel? Similarly, at the end of the preface, what happens in both of these literatures is that a question is asked. And this question becomes the foundation for the rest of the literature. So the question in the Bhagavad Gita is the question that Arjuna asks in 2.7 when he says, what is my dharma? I'm confused. And in the Bhagavatam, if you look, then the question is 119, 38 to 39, the verses we're reading right now. These verses are supremely important because they describe the question which the whole Bhagavatam is basically based on. But then there's another parallel. After that preface is done and after the question is answered, what we find is an immediate summary of the answer. So if you look at Bhagavad Gita, then basically the entire chapter 2, what is it entitled? Contents of the Gita summarized. And if you look at Canto 2 of the Bhagavatam, and specifically chapters 1 to 3, by the time you get to chapter 3, in those 3 chapters, Sukadeva Goswami has basically described all the philosophy of Bhagavatam. He's answered the question. Chapter 3 is entitled Pure Devotional Service. So actually, in one sense, Bhagavatam could have ended in the 3rd chapter of the 2nd canto. But Parikshit looked at Sukadeva and was kind of like, yo, I got 7 days left to live here still. I better start asking some questions so the conversation continues. And so the conversation continued. But basically, by the 3rd chapter, Sukadeva had summarized the entirety of Bhagavad Dharma. Then what happens in both of these literatures, there's another comparison, which is that the essence is found right in the middle. So in the Bhagavad Gita, the essence is found in chapter 9, Raja Vidya, the most confidential knowledge. And in the Bhagavatam, the essence is found in canto number 10. And if you look at the verse numbers, then basically canto number 10 probably began about 3.5 days into the conversation, because cantos number 10, 11, and 12 are basically half of the Bhagavatam. And the canto 10 is all about Krishna's pastime. That's the essence of the literature. And chapter number 9 of the Gita is the essence, because Krishna says, just keep thinking about me. So can you see how in both literatures, the essence is right in the middle? But not just that. Now check this out. After Krishna has given the essence, then what happens in the end of the literature? He gives the parting wisdom. So if you look at Bhagavad Gita, chapters number 13 to 18, then they're all about Jnana Yoga. And Jnana Yoga is basically all about detachment and renouncing yourself from the world. So the end of the Gita is all about detachment and renouncing yourself. And if you look at the end of the Bhagavatam, cantos number 11 and 12, they're all actually about detachment. Because Uddhava Gita is Krishna preparing Uddhava to take sannyas. And chapter number 12 is all about Kali Yuga, encouraging us to become detached from the world. So can you see the parting wisdom is all about detachment? And then finally, in both literatures, the ultimate instruction is given at the end. If you look at, obviously, Bhagavad Gita, 1866, then Krishna says, Sarva dharman parityaja. Krishna before that says, Manmana bhava mad bhakto, the ultimate instruction. And the ultimate instruction of Bhagavatam is also given right at the end when Sukadeva Goswami cites this very important verse, Nam Sin Kirtanam Yasya Sarva Papa Pranashanam, that one should engage in Nam Sankirtan. So just for one moment, I'm just trying to share with you how there is a very, very clear parallel between the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita. And it's very, very beautiful that we see how the literature and the wisdom and the philosophy flows in this way, because it's the best way in which we can actually grasp all of this knowledge. So today I'm sharing this with you because our verse 1:19:38 is basically the question. If you look at 1:19:37 and 38, these verses are the verses on which the whole Bhagavatam is based. And so Sukadeva Goswami is being asked the question by Parikshit, what should I do? Basically, what's my purpose? Why am I existing? And what, so in psychology or just in the world today, we see that there are different questions you can ask. Why, how, and what? What do you think, which of these questions do you think is the question we should start with? Start with what? Start with how? Or start with why?
I would say what.
What? Okay. That's the out-of-the-box thinking. Start with what? Anyone have another question? Anyone have another opinion? Which do you think is the most important one to start with?
I would say why.
Why? Prabhu says why. Prabhu says why. Why do you say why?
Yeah, I would say why, because the understanding has to be there before anything can be proceeded.
Yes, yes. If you think about what, this is activities. If you think about how, this is strategy. But if you think about why, this is purpose.
Yes.
So generally, we would go from up down, because once you know what your purpose is, then you can create a strategy. And once you know what the strategy is, then you decide the activities. So therefore, we should always start with why. In the world today, people don't ask why. Like even Vedanta Sutra begins, Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Now you have a human form. Inquire, why am I here? Why is there suffering? Why does the world exist? Why do I not find happiness even though I try so much? Why? When we're kids, even Prabhu, Govinda Prabhu, I can see next to you is a nice, your daughter or a nice little lady there. And when we're kids, we always ask why, isn't it? Kids are always asking why. But why, Dad? Why? Why? They always want to know the deeper reason. But when we grow up, we lose that capacity. So we must always ask why. So the Bhagavatam begins with this question, why? And then Parikshit also asks, and what are the activities that accompany that why? And therefore you see here, what? He wants to know the activities based on understanding the why. So this is very, very beautiful. Questions are really, really important, right? The quality of life is dependent upon the quality of the questions we ask. Nowadays, people don't ask very good questions. For example, I've not done it, but you can do a check on the most often questions asked in the Google search engine. Right? You do an experiment sometime and see what kind of questions people are asking out there. When people go to an astrologer, what kind of questions do they usually ask? You know, who am I going to marry? How can I earn money? What's the lottery numbers for the upcoming weeks? I can try and make money. You know, people ask all kind of rubbish questions. Now, if someone can learn to ask the right questions, then their life begins to transform. Let me just share this with you. We have to ask the right questions, but not just that, we have to ask them at the right time. But not just that, we have to ask them to the right person. But not just that, we have to ask them in the right spirit. Now, most people in this world, they fail on usually all four of these. But if not all four, they at least fail on 3 or 2 or at least 1. Maybe they ask the right questions, but they ask it at the wrong time. They ask at the end of their life when practically they can't change anything. Or they ask the right questions at the right time, but they ask the wrong person. They go to an imposter, someone who doesn't really have substantial spiritual insight. Even sometimes someone may ask the right questions at the right time to the right person, but they don't ask with the right spirit. For example, Krishna says to Arjuna, Tadvidi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. You have to ask, but you have to be humble. You have to be open. You have to ask in the spirit that now what this person's telling me, I'm going to actually try and apply it in my life. They say it takes a good person to give good advice, but it takes a great person to accept the good advice. You have to be even greater, humble to accept the advice. Now, when we ask the right questions at the right time to the right person in the right spirit, then those questions become the gateway to spiritual realization. If you look at all of our Shastra, then Shastra is basically question and answer. Bhagavad Gita, question and answer. Bhagavatam, just a series of dialogues, question and answer. Even Chaitanya Charitamrita, all the dialogues, question and answer. You know, even Mahaprabhu's asking Ramananda Rai questions in search of life's ultimate goal. Questions and answers are the means by which we unlock deeper truths. Because questions don't just reveal philosophy, but questions also unravel the complexity of how to apply that philosophy in our daily life. That's why at the end of every class, yes, we may have discussed so much philosophy, but now we got to have questions, because now we got to unravel the complexity of how and what I'm going to do with that knowledge to live it in my life in the here and now. And that's more difficult. So Parikshit was an incredible person because he asked the right questions at the right time to the right person and the right spirit. And therefore, they're glorified. Munayo saduprishtoham bhavad bir lokamangalam yat krita Krishna samprashno yenatma suprasidati. The questions of the great souls like Parikshit are known as samprashno. Sam, you know, Sankirtan, Sangha, comes from the word samyak, which means complete. And prashna means question. So the questions of the great souls are complete questions, comprehensive questions, questions which look at things from all angles of vision. And because these questions are asked, yenatma suprasidati, they allow one to ultimately achieve satisfaction of the soul. So one of the reasons why Bhagavatam is, Jiva Goswami says there's 3 reasons why Bhagavatam is so incredible. One reason is because it was written by the author in his maturity. Because Vyasadeva had written so many things, but then in his maturity, he realized, I haven't glorified the Lord. I have to write Bhagavatam. But not just that, he said that Bhagavatam is also the most elevated because of the speaker's purity. Because Sukadev Goswami was a person of unparalleled spiritual purity. Therefore, his realizations, his words were powerful. But not just that, he said that Bhagavatam is the most elevated because of the listener's inquiry. Because he asked the right questions. You see, you can have a very learned person, a very, very spiritually accomplished person, but if the audience doesn't ask the right question, then you're gonna miss out. You're gonna lose out. You're not gonna be able to benefit from that person. Therefore, the audience is sometimes just as important, not sometimes, always, just as important as the speaker, because the audience hold the key to drawing the essence out of the speaker. And therefore, Parikshit was a powerful because he was able to unlock that. This is very interesting. All of you know that there are 10 topics in the Bhagavatam. Atra sargo visargascha stanam poshanamutaya manvantera shunukatha nirodha muktira shraya. Now, Jiva Goswami says that every topic is in every chapter, it is in every canto. But Sridhar Swami, he says that there is also an emphasis. So the 3rd canto focuses on elemental. The 4th canto focuses on secondary creation. The 5th canto, or the hellish planet structure of the universe, is all about sthanam, planetary systems. Canto number 6, we hear about Ajamil, about Vritrasura. It's all about protection and mercy. In Canto 7, we hear about Hiranyakashipu. The whole canto is about Hiranyakashipu and Nishingadev, because it's all about the creative impetus is lust. Hiranyakashipu represents lust. Canto 8 is basically a series of stories which take us across the Manus. So we hear about Gajendra, about Vamanadev, about the churning of the milk ocean. These are all pastimes in the 8th canto. 9th canto is about different avatars, isn't it? Parashuram is there, Ramachandra is there, the activities leading up to Krishna's incarnation. 10th, we know, is the Ashraya, is Krishna's pastimes. 11th is all about liberation, because Krishna is speaking to Uddhava and he's telling Uddhava all the instructions so that Uddhava can ultimately take sannyas and become liberated. And finally, canto number 12 is all about universal dissolution, and how, ultimately everything will get annihilated, and Kali Yuga annihilates all qualities as well. So it's all about dissolution. So then the question remains, what do cantos 1 and 2 focus on? Does anyone know? Does anyone have an idea that if these 10 topics are spread across these cantos, what does canto number 1 and 2 focus on? Anyone have any ideas on the call?
Maharaj, go ahead, please.
Yeah, the canto 1, I would say it focused on the ultimate goal of life.
The ultimate goal of life, yeah. Like Prabhupada said, everything is summarized in the 1st canto. Very good, yeah.
I was going to suggest that cantos 1 and 2 are the summaries of cantos 3 through 12.
They're the summaries, yeah, they contain the major points of philosophy. Yeah, it seems both of you are saying similar things. Yeah, good points. You're right. And there's many ways to look at the Bhagavatam. But this is what Sridhar Swami says. He says, canto number 1 is actually all about adhikar, qualification. Because he's saying in canto 1, we find many conversations. We find a conversation, for example, between the sages of Naimisharanya and Sutta Goswami. We find a conversation in canto number 1 between Narada and Vyas. We find a conversation in canto number 1 between Parikshit and Sukadev. And in all of these conversations, what we're hearing about or what we're learning is the qualification of the hearer. Vyasa asks amazing questions to Narada, therefore his knowledge comes out. The sages ask amazing questions of Sutta, therefore the wisdom comes out. And Parikshit asks amazing questions of Sukadev, therefore amazing wisdom comes out. And therefore, Sridhar Swami says, we learn that the qualification of the hearer, we can closely learn this, because you can hear the whole Bhagavatam, but if you don't have qualification as a hearer, what you will grasp? So it makes sense that the Bhagavatam begins with establishing who is the ideal person to hear the Bhagavatam, what kind of consciousness, character do they have? And then canto number 2, Sridhar Swami says focuses on sadhana, or the means of attainment, because in canto number 2, basically all the different sadhanas are summarized. You can worship the impersonal, you can worship the universe, you can worship the demigods, but ultimately pure devotional service trumps everything. Devotional service is the ultimate sadhana, the ultimate practice. And therefore, canto number 2 establishes this. So as we read 1:19:38, we're again hearing what is the qualification of a hearer. They're asking the right questions. What did Prabhupada, he wrote the book, Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers. Right? You don't go to a guru and just ask them, who should I get married to? I mean, you can ask for marriage advice. They can also help you, but that they can give you something much deeper. They can give you something much more profound. They can teach you about principles that can then help you to answer all of these questions yourself. You see, you can ask questions of what, but if you ask the guru questions of why, then the what's become very, very naturally illuminated. Now, one last thing I'm going to share with you about this verse, and then I'm going to open it up for any discussion points, is that Parikshit asks an interesting thing. He says, let me know everything I should hear, chant, remember, and worship, but also tell me what I shouldn't do. Now, that's very interesting. That's very, very interesting. Because generally, if you look, whenever we approach a guru, generally we ask questions of what we should do. But just as important as what we should do is knowing what we shouldn't do. I'm going to show you now another verse from the Bhagavatam. This is from the Chatu Shloki. As you know, Krishna summarized the whole Bhagavatam to Brahma in 4 verses. And this is the final of those 4 verses. So you can say this is the conclusion of the Bhagavatam. And what does the Lord say? A person who is searching after the absolute truth, the personality of Godhead, must certainly search for it up to this, in all circumstances, in all space and time, and both directly and indirectly. This is very interesting. You should directly search for Krishna, but you should also indirectly search for Krishna. What does it mean to indirectly search for Krishna? What does it mean to indirectly connect to Krishna? All of you know the answer to this. If I said the direct way to connect to Krishna is to always remember Krishna, then what would be the indirect way to connect to Krishna?
Never forget.
Never forget him. Yes, you get the prize. Wonderful. If the direct way to connect to Krishna is material attachment, what's the indirect way to connect to Krishna? Ganga Prasad Prabhu.
Material detachment.
Material detachment. Yes. Nice to hear your voice, Ganga Prasad Prabhu. If the direct way to connect to Krishna is niyams, following niyams, things that you should do, then what's the indirect way to connect to Krishna?
Things you should not do.
Yes, yamas, there are things that we should avoid, things that we should not do. And then if the direct way to connect to Krishna is to accept everything that's favorable for devotional service, anukulyasya sankalpa, then the indirect way, all of you know, pratikulyasya varjanam, you should reject the unfavorable. Now this is very, very interesting, because many of us in our spiritual life, we focus a lot on this. Chant, read, serve, do all the positive things in spiritual life. But if we neglect the other side, if we're not serious about these, if we're not serious about these things, then although you're directly trying to connect to Krishna, if you don't also honor the indirect things, then the spiritual practices may not have as much power as they could have. And therefore, letting go, detaching, giving certain things up, as Parikshit is asking Sukadev Goswami, tell me what I should do and tell me what I shouldn't do. Tell me the things that I should grasp and tell me the things I should let go of. So one French philosopher, he says, it's not just about the daily increase in spirituality, but it's all about the daily decrease in materialism. Right? Both are just as important as each other. Another philosopher, he says, enlightenment is not when there's nothing left to add. It's when there's nothing left to take away. So gradually, we have to let go of things that are not favorable to our spiritual life. And Parikshit is asking for that. Now, let me ask you, what are some of the things that you think we have to let go of in our spiritual life in order to advance as far as we could advance? We know the things that we have to do, chant, read, serve, but what are the things we have to let go of?
Envy.
Envy, so bad qualities is definitely one of them. Anything else we need to let go of?
Yes, greed.
Greed, okay, yeah. Let's just say qualities, because otherwise we'll go through all the qualities. So let's just say bad qualities, envy, greed, pride, anger, lust, all of those things we need to let go of. What other things do you think you need to let go of? Is there anything else that you're holding on to that could be holding you back? Yeah, Rasalila Priya Mataji?
I would say our own conception or misconceptions of what we think we know.
Yes, mindset
About
or
spiritual life.
misconceptions. Yeah. Yes. Mindsets and misconceptions, certain attitudes. We need to let go of those attitudes because they're not serving us. They're not helping us. Anything else? Narayani, Mataji?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Attachment.
Attachments. Yeah, we're holding on to so many attachments, material attachments, things that we feel we can't live without. Very good. Anything else?
Yeah, propensity is to enjoy material life.
The enjoying mentality, yes. The seeing the world as though we're at the center, that everything is for our enjoyment and exploitation. Thank you, Prabhu. Ganga Prasad, Prabhu?
Our false identification, ego.
Yes, upadhis, our false identification and ego. I am this, I am from this country, I am this position. All of these designations. Yeah, these are the, sorry? Yeah. These are the things we have to let go of. We also have to let go of places, environments which don't serve us. Certain environments and surroundings are not good for us. We have to learn to let go. Certain people, what about that one? There are certain people in our life who are not serving us, are not helping us. We're not helping them. They're not helping us. In the world, they call them toxic relationships. We need to let go sometimes of these things. Habits. We've been habituated to doing things in a certain way. Certain situations, sometimes we need to walk away. There's a difference between walking away from something and running away from something. When you run away from something, you're leaving the situation because you're fearful, because you're lazy, because you're, because you don't want to live up to your responsibility. That's running away. But sometimes you can walk away from a situation when you're doing it consciously because you have something much greater you need to aim for. Attitudes, as someone mentioned, we have to let go of, and character traits. So much of Krishna consciousness is about letting go of many, many things. And so today, in today's class, just to summarize before I open it up and see whether there may be any questions. Number one, we talked about the comparison, the similarities between the Gita and the Bhagavatam. Then we talked about how the Bhagavatam is basically based and founded upon this question that we're hearing today that Parikshit asked Sukadev Goswami. Later on, we heard that the whole Bhagavatam, the first canto, is based on the adhikar, the qualification of the listener. Because if the listener is eager, desperate, if the listener can ask the right questions at the right time, in the right spirit, to the right person, then wisdom can flow. And then we looked a little bit closer at the question that Parikshit asked Sukadev, and specifically, very interestingly, that he asked not just what should I do, but he asked what should I avoid? What should I let go of? How should I not just directly connect to you, but how should I indirectly connect to you? And how this is such an important aspect for our spiritual life to factor both aspects in. So thank you very much for your attention. These were just some thoughts I wanted to share with you. And I can now open it up to see whether anyone may have any questions, any comments, or any practical reflections that they may want to share. Then we can have a bit of a discussion based on that. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much, Maharaj, for such a wonderful presentation of the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. They are just like twins. Actually, I have heard that Chaitanya Charitamrita is the postgraduate study of teachings. And because I haven't yet even started elementary, I've been avoiding reading the Chaitanya Charitamrita. But somehow or other, I chanced upon your compressed form or abridged form of the Chaitanya Charitamrita, which makes the studies of the Chaitanya Charitamrita quite convenient for beginners. So thank you so much, Maharaj, for putting
Thank you, Prabhu.
the book together. It's if you do not have that book, maybe you can inbox me. I can send it to you. It's a very important book. I think every devotee should have. So, Ms. Gail, please, you may unmute and ask your question. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Thank you for this class.
And please, if possible, if you can turn on your cameras, especially.
Yeah, sorry, Prabhu, not possible.
Okay.
So a couple of comments. One is that I'm not sure if it was said, but I thought another thing that we could let go of is the 10 offenses, or actually the 11th. So that's like one of the most major impediments, I think, to our progress. So I thought to mention that. And another similarity that I've heard that exists between the Bhagavatam and the Gita is that in both scriptures, the first time that Krishna makes his appearance is as the charioteer of his devotee, which illustrates, his, I think, Bhakta Vatsal quality, the how, profound his love is for his devotee, that he is willing to accept such a menial role of service for his dear devotee. So that's just a parallel that I've always heard.
Oh, wow, that's beautiful. I've never heard that before. That's beautiful, beautiful.
Yes.
That's very nice. I've never heard that, yeah.
Damodar Maharaj often makes this point.
Wow, yeah, because we hear about Krishna, with Arjun on the chariot as Ashvatam's Brahmastra is coming. Is that the point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, right, in the first canto. And then we hear about Krishna on the chariot when Arjun says, Sena Yoru, take my chariot to the middle of the battlefield. Yeah, that's very beautiful. And Rupa Goswami, actually, it's interesting you mentioned this quality of Bhakta Vatsala, because Rupa Goswami says, for Gaudiyas, we basically worship three main forms of the Lord, Krishna, Rama, and Nrsingadev. And if you notice, those three forms of the Lord are most prominent in our tradition. And someone may ask, why those three? And Rupa Goswami says, because in those three, there is the greatest amount of Bhakta Vatsala, Krishna's quality as Bhakta Vatsala in exchange with his devotees is very, very prominent. And so that's, the devotees always want to connect with the Lord in that mood. So that's also very, very nice. And yes, yeah, and your point of letting go of offenses, yeah, right. Because Chaitanya Charitamrita says, Bahu Janma Kari Jadi Shravana Kirtan Tabutan Apaya Krishna Pade Prema Dhan. Prabhupada quoted this verse many times, that Bahu Janma, for many lifetimes, Shravana Kirtan, you can hear and chant. For many lifetimes you can do it. Tabutan Apaya Krishna Pade Prema Dhan. But you won't get prema for Krishna if you are infested with the 10 offenses. And the root of all offenses is inattentiveness. So we have to let go of our inattentiveness, our apathy, our lackadaisical approach, and ultimately our offenses, because we're losing mercy. through those acts of offense. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Very nice points.
Okay, Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much, Maharaj, and thank you so much for the question. And so this question comment, Ms. Gail. Dear devotees, please remember when we addressing Maharaj, we use the proper word that we need to use, that is Maharaj. There is difference between Maharaj and Prabhu. Please remember not to make such a mistake. This is one, do not, as we stated in the class today. Dear devotees, if anyone has a question, please. Okay, Govinda Prabhu, you may unmute.
Thank you very much, Maharaj. I've been hearing your classes, your presentations practically every day. And
Thank you.
very, very much for your dedication to the service of Srila Prabhupada. Thank you very, very much. Maharaj, my question is, what is the best way that we can hear and actually derive the maximum benefit? What is the best way of hearing?
Wow, that's a beautiful question. Beautiful question. Give me 1 second. I want to bring something up because this might help you to grasp it. Just be patient with me. Because what we find is that in the beginning of the Bhagavatam, before the Bhagavatam is recited, then we have something called the Bhagavat Mahatmya, which is a glorification of the Bhagavatam. And in that glorification of the Bhagavatam, what is given is 4 qualities of the superior hearer. And 4 qualities we should try to imbibe, which will help us to derive the kind of maximum benefit from the philosophy of the Bhagavatam. So I'm just trying to bring that up on a slide so I can show you. But I just need 1 minute, if you can give me, just to find it. We're given a metaphor of 4 different, yes, here we go. All right. So I'm just going to share my screen so you can see. I hope you can see here.
Yes, ma'am.
4 qualities of the superior listeners. So the first quality of being a good hearer is you look at the Chataka bird. Prabhupada often calls the Chataka bird a thunderbird. And what it does is its special quality is it always drinks right from the source. So one of the main things will help us in hearing is we have to hear from the right source. You see, like even if we don't have urgency, if we don't have attention span, if we don't have desire or conviction when we're hearing, if we hear from someone who does, then it's somehow in a sense that because you're getting it from the pure source, there's a certain power that then empowers your own hearing. Therefore, we stress so much that the devotee should hear Prabhupada's lectures. Not just read Prabhupada's books, that's very good, but audibly hear the vibration coming from the mouth of a pure devotee, a sadhu. Then the second thing is the swan. Prabhupada always gives the example of a swan that it can separate milk from water. In other words, the swan knows how to extract the lesson, extract the essence. So when we're hearing, we should constantly be thinking, what's the essence? What's the lesson? How does this apply to my life? In English, they say, what's the bottom line? What does this mean when I'm hearing all of this? And what do I take away to apply in my own life? Then you become a superior hearer. The parrot can repeat whatever it hears. And therefore, the good listener is able to hear and then share it with others. And when you share with others, your own hearing becomes clarified and solidified. So this is another quality of superior listeners, that they hear it with the intent to share it. You see, like when you're hearing and you have an intent, not just to apply it, but think to yourself, how would I explain this to someone else? Then you hear it with a greater attentiveness. And finally, the fish, Srila Prabhupada gives the example that when a fish is underwater, then it doesn't even blink. A fish never blinks. So therefore, one of the most important things when we're hearing is not to allow yourself to be distracted. The great blessing and the great curse of Zoom is that the great blessing is we can connect like anything, but the great curse is that it can be very distracted hearing, because we're on our computers, people are around us, and we can't give our full rapt attention. So, so these are some of the qualities of those who listen with a higher grade, that they listen from pure souls, that they listen with an intent to apply it and learn a lesson for their life. They listen with a view to sharing it with others. They listen without allowing themselves to be distracted by so many things around them. They give their full heart and attention. This is one way to answer your query, Govinda Prabhu, but the science of how to become a good hearer, there's many angles we could take that question from, but today I took this angle, and perhaps on other days we can explore other aspects of being a good listener. I hope that helps a little bit.
Yeah, it helps a lot. Yeah, it does help, Maharaj. Thank you very much. Yeah, you see, I was thinking when you were explaining the best possible way we can hear. You made mention of processing, hearing and processing what you are hearing, and I found that as a challenging, because if you are hearing and at the same time you are processing, then how can you hear simultaneously? You're processing and try to hear. Is that possible?
In a sense, Govinda Prabhu, we do that, right? So because say, for example, like say now, for example, you just made a comment and I was listening to it. But as I was listening to it, I was simultaneously processing it, because if I didn't process it, I wouldn't be able to reply to you. So if I was just hearing your words, but I wasn't processing it, I'd have no way to respond to you. So in a sense, we're always doing that. We're hearing and we're processing. But you're right. There's one English writer, he says, don't listen to reply, but listen to understand. And so that is interesting, because in what you say, there is actually truth, that sometimes when we're listening to someone, if we're trying to overanalyze it and everything in the moment, then we actually miss out on really understanding what they're saying. But at the same time, there is a sense in which we're listening and we're processing it. So there's some truth to that. But yeah, there's, I guess a lot of it also, Govinda Prabhu, what I would say is a lot of processing can be done after as well, like after we've heard. Like we often think, oh, I heard the class finished, job done. But actually the real thing actually sometimes begins after the class, because that's when you sit down and in your own peaceful time, you can do mananam, which is deep contemplation. So the Vedic learning goes through 4 stages: Shravanam, hearing; Mananam, contemplation; Nididhyasanam, application; and then Vandanam, prayer. So if you do that full life cycle, then you're able to grasp the most you can from it.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much, Maharaj. I was actually thinking, Govinda Prabhu's question, if someone is hearing without processing, then it remains simple listening. One is just listening. But when we listen with processing, and then it becomes hearing, because hearing means it's sticking. It's sticking to our thoughts and consciousness, and we want to do something about it. So we'll go to Sriman Vara Prabhu, please. Prabhuji, you may unmute.
Hare Krishna.
If possible, you may turn on your camera, if possible.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Jai Hare Krishna Maharaj. Dandavat Pranam.
My
All
thanks to
glories
you.
to the devotees. All glories to Prabhupada. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. Very educative. I have, well, one question is in my mind, which I'm trying to brush aside, but maybe Pastor wants me to say something. When you're making that comparison about Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and then when you were talking about the conclusion of the Gita, the conclusion, or especially of the Srimad Bhagavatam, then it brings to mind the Bhagavatamrita, which is supposed to be, the book. So it's supposed to be like conclusion of the whole Bhagavatam. So I was just thinking about that, but that is just at the back of my mind. Maybe if you want to say something about Bhagavatamrita. Now, the question I want to ask is about because you're giving very analytical, kind of class presentations. So it makes me, why reflecting on this. I'm remembering some of the things my guru used to teach, especially in his books, Leadership. And so the purpose of knowledge, application and then transformation and all that stuff. Brahmanas in the past are highly respected for their products. They're guiding and they're also very effective in puja, in making things happen. And with our knowledge and with what we have, in Krishna consciousness today, I'm actually trying to put, where is our effectiveness, in terms of our relevance to the society. We have this much knowledge, and when it comes to the application, and in terms of impacting the world, in terms of what is our effectiveness, sometimes it's very hard to pinpoint. So I just want to be sure that we, maybe convince myself that we are not too much on theory, being theoretical. And so as Brahmanas and as people who have such high knowledge, in what way are we really impacting on the society, bringing about the transformation necessary, not just being armchair philosophers? Thank you, Maharaj.
Wow, such a powerful point. Yeah, I think this is so important that Srila Prabhupada was on a mission to teach the world that Krishna consciousness has the solution to the world's problems. Therefore, we have to provide the world with some real answers. If tomorrow someone puts a mic in front of one of our leaders and says, if you guys were in charge of the government, what would you do to improve the economy? Or what would you do to solve the environmental crisis? Or what is your opinion on global conflict and how to overcome it? What practical steps would you implement in order to deal with crime? Then we should have something to say. I think Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj was a real leader in that area, because he was, I think even one of his books is called Spiritual Solutions to Material Problems, or Solace for the World in Difficult Times. And he was really bringing the knowledge into a context in which people could then say like, oh, this is how I live it. This is how it changes my life. And so I think that's one of the challenges for the Krishna consciousness movement, that we have a lot of good principles, that we're able to give a high level answer. Like if you remember in the beginning of the presentation, I gave the why, the how, and the what. So sometimes the Krishna consciousness movement is very good at the high level stuff. But then when it comes to the strategies and the tactics and the activities, we don't have much to say. Whereas the world is generally very good at coming up with all these strategies and all of these tactics. But the problem is they're not based on anything deep. And therefore those strategies and tactics don't work. I often say if you go in bookshops today, one of the biggest genres is self-help. And what I say is that many books give you a lot of help, but they don't have much self in them. They don't tell you much about who you are really, like deeply. And some books, they tell you a lot about who you are existentially, but they don't give you much help in terms of practical advice of how to live in this world. So really the challenge of the Krishna consciousness movement is to really bring those two things together. And I really appreciate your point. That's why we need devotees who are experts in the field of economics, devotees who are expert in the fields of the environment, devotees who are expert in the field of leadership and management, who know the kind of the landscape of what's going on in the world, and they also know the Krishna conscious philosophy, and they can figure out how to bring those things together. So yeah, thank you for raising that. It's a great point. And yes, Brihat Bhagavatamrita is considered to draw out the essence of the Bhagavatam. So the Brihat Bhagavatamrita consists of two stories. The story of Narad Muni, number one, trying to figure out who got the most mercy. And the second story is the story of Gopa Kumar, who is trying to figure out what's the highest abode. And so these two form the essence of the Bhagavatam, because Narada concludes that the highest mercy was drawn by the gopis of Vrindavan and Srimati Radharani. And Gopakumar concludes that the highest abode is Goloka Vrindavan. And so, yes, this is the essence of the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam doesn't just tell you who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Bhagavatam also tells you who's the Supreme Personality of Krishna. Right? The Supreme Personality of Krishna is Krishna, who lives in Vrindavan, who plays a flute, who runs with the cowherd boys and has beautiful pastimes of love. So yes, this is concluded in Brihat Bhagavatamrita. Thank you for your comment.
Thank you very much, Maharaj.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. Thank you for the question, Shrimad Prabhu. Anyone else with any question or comment? Rasalila Mataji, please unmute. I'm sure you may not be able to turn on your camera, so go ahead and ask your question, please.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much for the wonderful class, and also for making yourself available for us today. I know one class that you gave not too long ago was to make ourselves available, just as Sridham Prabhu did for so many devotees. So thank you so much for for being with us today. My question was letting go. A lot of times we talk about letting go, but then it's like, what do we replace it with? So for instance, in the healthcare industry, some patients who try to wean off of medications, it says, well, you cannot take pain medication for so long, but then they're left with what next? So we can't just let go without replacing. And a lot of times the Maha Mantra, chanting, begging for mercy, chanting, begging for service. But then when Krishna arranges for these mercy to come through our way, it's like we don't see it or we refuse to take it. And so so when there is an opportunity to let go and then replace it with something higher, there is a tendency to sometimes reject it and say, no, this is not what I want. And so then the cycle begins of being stuck in the same pothole. And so what would your recommendation be to let go firmly and then accept the replacement that Krishna always arranges for us. So thank you.
Yeah,
Hare
thank you,
Krishna.
Rasalila, Matthew. It was a great point. I mean, Rupa Goswami talks about this, right? He talks about bhoga, tyag, how it's like a pendulum, like you try to enjoy something, you get frustrated, and then you give it up. But because you don't have anything else, then eventually bhoga, tyaga. And we're not able to stay on a steady platform because you can tyaga, you can give things up. But Krishna says, raso varjam raso pyasya. If you give up the lower rasa, but you don't have a higher rasa, then you won't be fixed in consciousness. So yeah, when we let go of things, we need to replace it. Like I think this is one of the reasons why community is so important. It's something that, you know, our eminent leaders have talked about and pushed so much, that we got to have spiritual community. Because what happens in community is you're able to find replacements for a lot of the things that you give up. So for example, we give people up, but then we need other people to relate to. We give up certain activities and hobbies, but then in community, we find other hobbies, and, you know, we give up certain behaviors, but in community, in exchange with each other, we learn new behaviors. So community is so important because it provides another world for us to live in. And therefore, like, I feel ultimately ISKCON is about community building. Because when we're community building, what we're basically doing is we're creating a whole new world full of alternatives to what the world had to offer us before. And therefore, you're giving yourself a chance to remain in the spiritual energy. But if you take up a process, but you don't have that kind of living situation, that ecosystem of spirituality, then you've let go of all of these things. You can't. I once met a Christian lady from Zimbabwe. I gave her the Bhagavatam. She read it. I gave her up to the 6th canto of the Bhagavatam, 1 volume at a time, and she read all of it. And she understood it. She grasped it. And out of the blue one day, she messaged me and she said, I can even show you the message. She said, I've never come across any theology like this ever. I've studied Christianity my whole life. I've not studied anything as deep as this. And then in the very next paragraph, she said, but I can't associate with you guys anymore because this philosophy is shaking my world. And if I pursue this philosophy, I'm going to have to give up my friends. I'm going to have to give up my society. I'm going to have to give up my whole social structure, which is based around the church. And I'm not ready to do that. And therefore, and then the amazing thing is, 5 years later, I had no contact with her. And one day I got the finances of the Mana temple. And I noticed that she was giving £1,000 donation every year secretly, even though she wasn't practicing, because she knew this is the real thing.
Okay.
So yeah, I think your point is so good that unless we create community, because in community we create replacement, then we can facilitate devotees to let go of things. Yeah, again, your question is so like, we could approach it from so many angles, but those are just a few thoughts.
Thank you so much,
Maharaj. Thank you.
And Rasalila Priya, David, thank you for the question. Maharaj, it's very interesting. You were sharing with us the reaction you received from this lady you were distributing the Bhagavatam to. I have a similar feeling. You know, I have had this feeling that when I become, because I think within myself that I could be a better devotee than what I am today. But I also feel within myself that if I become more serious, then Krishna may give me tougher tests. Or Krishna may even kick me out of my body, and I'm not willing to get out of my body. So let me take it at a very slow pace. So I think, all right. This is just by the way.
No,
Prabhu, please unmute.
Yeah, Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna, Hare Chakra Prabhu.
All glories to you, all glories to Prabhupada, and all glories to the assembled devotees. Yeah, the question I have is like a little bit in line with what Rasalila Mataji just asked. Because I was looking at the presentation that you were giving and the things that we should let go. In my line of work, where I work, I meet a lot of people. And there is this particular homeless guy. He's homeless. He comes to my stand and he talks about detachment, how you have to detach yourself. My goodness, sometimes he can talk and I feel like everything I have learned in all these years in Krishna consciousness, this boy is spelling it out in like few minutes. So this guy is so inclined to how we have to detach from this material world. And he goes, but he doesn't even want to talk about God. So my question is, does detaching from the world and all those things that we should let go, does it necessarily help us to advance on spiritual path?
Yeah, Hari Chakrapu, great question. One thing I wanted to say is just make sure you don't let go of the steering wheel, yeah? No, thank you for your question. You know, Hari Chakrapu, detachment, it can take place on different levels. So what we say is one level by which you cultivate detachment is from frustration. You know, when someone just got beat up by the material world, hit up by the material energy, there's a sense in which they can speak with full realization about detachment. They're just like, this world is like, you don't need to tell me Bhaktisiddhanta's quote about the toilet, I've seen it for myself. So one level of detachment comes from frustration. Higher than that is detachment, which comes from knowledge. Someone sees, it's good for me if I let these things go because there's a higher reality. But the highest type of detachment comes from taste. When you're so attached to something else, vairagya means detachment, right? But vairagya has a double meaning, vishesha, raga. Vishesha means special, raga means attachment. So vairagya means a detachment, but the double meaning is it means a special type of attachment. In other words, when you're specially attached to Krishna, then detachment comes. So you'll find that there are many people in the world who can speak with full realization about detachment, but ultimately they can't live it because we have to do something in our life. We have to love something. We have to pursue something. So if you're not going to love Krishna, if you're not going to pursue the spiritual world, then you'll have to love something and pursue something in the material world, and you won't be able to detach yourself. I go on book distribution, people at Christmas time, they got like 10 shopping bags, and I stop them and I'm like, this book is teaching you that happiness is not in material things. And they're like, yeah, I agree. And I'm looking at all their bags and I'm like, the fact of the matter is you can't give it up unless you have something higher. So your point, I think, Hari Chakrapu, is a great point, that many people speak about detachment because they've seen the naked form of the material energy. And even us as devotees, we've seen the naked form of material energy often. But still, until and unless we connect, we can't really live it. We can't live that detachment. So detachment which comes from frustration and detachment which comes from knowledge is never a steady detachment. But detachment which comes from taste, that's real detachment.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Maharaj.
Thank you, Hari.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. As you were answering, I was thinking about the unsuccessful fox who was trying to jump to pick the grapes. And because he couldn't jump to grab it, he says, after all, forget about this grape.
Grapes.
It's not sweet anyway.
Yeah, sour
So-
grapes. Yeah.
The sour grapes, sorry, grapes. So thank you so much, Maharaj. Out of frustration, one may be speaking that way, but when you have it and you have to live it, it's a different story.
Mm.
Govinda Prabhu, please, you may unmute.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. Thank you again. When you were doing the both the positive and the negative aspects of detachment, attachment, happiness, distress, and you made mention of this question of remembering Krishna and not to forget Krishna. Remembering Krishna, and the opposite side of that
Don't
is,
forget him.
you see, so often when we talk of let go, we mostly think of things that people might have done to us, situations that come to us as a challenge. And so when we hear of let go, we think of let go of such things.
Mm.
And so as a result of that, it said we can forgive, but it's difficult to forget. So
Mm.
if we can let go, but it's difficult to forget. So you can let something go, but that thing has imprinted in one's mind and heart. So that attachment is still there. Even though you say, I forgive you, Mataji, I forgive you, Prabhuji, but that impression is still there on mind.
Mm.
Anyway, and also the other side here is that seeing Krishna in everything. You see, naturally, the living entities are made to enjoy. We are blissful entities. And so we always search for happiness. Nobody search for distress. But here we are in the conditional world, the material world. We see negative things more than the positive that is expected. So when we speak of seeing Krishna always, or see Krishna in everything, how do we see Krishna in negative things? When the negative challenges comes to us, how do we see Krishna in those negativities in order for us to be situated in Krishna consciousness? How do we do that?
Yeah, it's a tough one. Yes, Govinda Prabhu, you've made very deep comments. Let me try to share some thoughts. Let me start with this point first. When we go through very negative experiences, how can we try to see Krishna? Well, before I talk about that, you talked about forgiving and forgetting, how we might be able to forgive, but we can't forget. It still leaves. It reminded me of, there's some story of Nelson Mandela, that when he came out of prison, when he came out of Rhode Island, then someone offered him a Gita and he said, I already read the Gita. And they said, what did you learn from it? Maybe Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj tells this story, or someone tells this story, I can't remember. And he said, what I learned was that the day I left prison, if I didn't simultaneously give up my bitterness, my anger, my negativity towards the perpetrators of my past, then even though I would have gone free from prison, I'd still be in prison, because you're imprisoned by your own emotions. And so, yes, like somehow in the Bhagavatam, we're just learning like a very high level of forgiveness. You got like Vasudeva and Devaki, who when they see the potential of some change in Kamsa, they're ready to forgive him. You think like, this guy just killed 6 of your children. You know, Ambarish, you know, like Durvasa is just chasing him around the universe, and Ambarish just has this phenomenal level of forgiveness. It seems to me, Govinda Prabhu, that the only way we can develop this forgiveness is when we just become immersed in the bigger reality of life. Like when our vision is so bigger, when our goal is so much bigger, when we see that this life's just one chapter, but I'm aiming for eternity. And when we're captured by that bigger picture, then I think the things that happen in this world on the backdrop of eternity, no matter how difficult they are in this world, they never affect us in the same way. And therefore, I feel that, you know, like I always give the example, if I have a cup of water and you put some salt in it, it will taste salty. But if I fill this whole room with water and then you put the salt in, it absorbs it. There's no change. So our consciousness has to become as deep as the room. It has to become deep, substantial. We have to see that, you know, it's like when you see a kid playing a video game, then the kid's like, oh no, I lost, you know, and it's just like all of his emotions are coming out. And the adult is just standing behind him thinking, this is just a computer game. What's up with this kid, you know? But for the kid, it's like they invested the totality of themselves into it. So it's like that. We're playing a computer game. This life is a flash in eternity. We're here today, gone tomorrow. And then another life, you know? But because we're into it, we can't see the perspective. So we have to develop that bigger vision and look back and say, you know, it's one life. I got to move on, you know. There's bigger things. There's bigger things I'm aiming for. And I know that just sounds like a very transcendental answer, but ultimately we have to become transcendental, because that's the goal of the Krishna consciousness movement, that we have to become so deep in our vision that everything of this world, when we frame it on the backdrop of eternity, we just have a different perspective to other people. And your second point about how do we try to see Krishna in all these difficulties of life, I think one mistake we make as devotees is we try to make out like everything that happens is good. You know, like we try to philosophically force ourselves to believe like, yeah, everything that's happening is good. And it's just like sometimes it becomes unreal. You're just like, no, this was not good. And what I say to people is that it's not that everything that happens is good, but it is that something good can come from everything that happens. Right? There's a difference there. In the first one, I just find it to be unrealistic, like to just like, oh, you know, you just found out you have cancer. No, it's a good thing. It's a good thing. No, it's not a good thing. I wouldn't wish cancer upon anyone. But we can say it's not that everything is good, but something good can come from everything that happens. I've got cancer. Where's the opportunities? How can I utilize it? And I think that's the approach which is more realistic, more and gives more potential for growth. Ask yourself, in this situation, what unique opportunity is Krishna giving me to rise? What unique opportunity is Krishna giving me to elevate myself that I wouldn't have if this situation didn't come about? And when we begin looking at life through that lens, then we begin to think, yes, something good can come from everything that happens.
Thank you so much, Maharaj, for the answer. And regarding the answer you just gave, I think we all can accept that this COVID-19 pandemic has been very, very catastrophic. But there has been some good things coming out of it, especially from us as devotees. I do not think with that the COVID, I might have your association as we are having with you today. So it's bad. It's bad. It's taking so many lives. It's very bad. But somehow we're making something positive out of it. So thank you so much, Maharaj. I have one question, but I will let Bill go. Mr. Bill, please unmute, and you may ask your question.
Oh, it looks like Govinda was really trying to say.
No, he was speaking. He didn't know he had his mic open.
Yes, actually, it's a follow-up question. Maharaj, thank you very much for it. But I'm still on the point of seeing Krishna in negativities. And then you rightly said that devotees should make mistake that we think this is negative, but actually if we learn from that negative, something good can come out of that negativity that we think it is. Actually, if you put, before any tree comes out as a tree, it starts from a seed. And before the seed can germinate and become that tree, it has to rot. That seed has to rot. So if you see that rotten seed and you think it's just rotten, so it's bad, then that means you are falling short of certain knowledge.
Definitely.
So yes, that is true. Something good can always come out from anything bad. But how do we then see the hands of Krishna in that something bad?
Yeah.
That is the aspect I would like you to address. How do we see it? Because Krishna says, there's nothing can move. There's nothing that can move without my.
How do we see Krishna?
Yes.
Parikshit saw Krishna. He said, today Krishna has come in front of me in the form of a curse launched from the mouth of a Brahmin boy. When Parikshit got cursed, he saw that was Krishna. How do we see Krishna? I think we see Krishna through Krishna's words. We see Krishna through Krishna's devotees. We see Krishna through Krishna's name. We see Krishna through prayer to Krishna. In other words, these are the means by which we detect how Krishna's hand is behind everything. Therefore, we must always be in contact with the wisdom. We must always be in contact with the holy name. We must always be praying to Krishna, dialoguing with Krishna, speaking with Krishna. Therefore, we have to be around devotees who are connected to Krishna, who help us channel the will of Krishna, understand the will of Krishna. So Prabhupada creates a whole network for us, like how we begin to see Krishna. One devotee, they asked him, have you seen Krishna? He said, I don't know if I ever seen Krishna's face, but I see his hand every single day. So that was very nice, because we begin to see Krishna's hand when we're close to the Shastra, when we're close to the holy name, when we're in a prayerful mood, when we're around devotees who are close to Krishna, then Krishna becomes visible even to us who are unqualified. So Yeah, and your point of the seed, I really like that. Like, one of the biggest problems in life is we judge things in the moment. We judge things in the moment, when actually we just need to step back and understand there's a life cycle going on here. And this is one snapshot of that life cycle. The caterpillar is struggling to get out of the cocoon, struggling. But all of that struggle to break open the cocoon means that when it becomes a butterfly, its wings have become strong enough so that it can fly in the sky. It has to struggle to open the cocoon to make that strength in the wings so it can fly. So Krishna wants us to fly, and therefore some struggle. Thank you, Govinda Prabhu. Very nice points.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj. So we go back to Miss Gail. Please unmute.
Thank you. Hare Krishna Maharaj. Yeah, just a couple things. Well, to follow up also on this discussion about how to recognize Krishna's hand. Yeah, I mean, I certainly agree with all the different ways in which you mentioned. But I was also thinking that, you know, as we advance in Krishna consciousness, you know, not only, you know, the symptoms are, or a couple of the symptoms are that our material attachments decrease, but another symptom is that our ability to see Krishna everywhere, that increases. So I'm just thinking that, you know, that ability to see Krishna's hand might just come with devotional maturity, isn't that?
Yeah, definitely. As like we're clouded right now by anarthas and upadhis, and by the process of bhakti, that those anarthas and those upadhis begin to clear. And as they begin to clear, then our vision becomes much more clear and connected to Krishna. So yeah, definitely with spiritual maturity comes more vision of Krishna, because we're less clouded by anarthas and upadhis.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, another thing I wanted to follow up on is this thing where we say that, well, the way I normally hear it is, you know, it's unrealistic to be grateful for everything, but we can be grateful, you know, we can't be grateful for every situation, but we can be grateful in every situation. It's just like another way of saying what you said.
Yeah. That's nice, right? Yeah.
So my question though is that Krishna is all good and all loving. There's nothing, he is the embodiment of benevolence, right? So I'm just wondering if we should even say that bad things do happen, you know, as if the things that happen to us are meant for our ultimate good, can we really say that those things are bad? Even cancer, you know, so when we say bad, I just feel like we're saying they're bad because they feel bad. But the real thing is, what is the result? So, you know, if you could comment on that.
It's a really good point. We're getting into a space here where I'm thinking out loud, so please don't think that anything I'm saying here is gospel truth. And I really like this. This is the purpose of Bhagavatam class. Here's one thought experiment I'd give to you. If Krishna could teach you what he wants to teach you without having any of those things we call negative situations coming, do you think Krishna would do that?
Yeah, I think he gives us the least amount of, you know, distress possible to achieve our benefits. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So that's the point. Like Krishna, it is a difficult, I'm sure like when Krishna gives us these shocking things in our life, I'm sure Krishna's kind of thinking like, I wish I didn't have to give it, but I have to do it because it's for their, it's like a parent, you know, when they have to tell off their children. If they can get through to their children without telling them off, it's like, yo, let's do that. Let's go that way. That's much better. So I think my sense is that although everything that Krishna is doing is good, because number one, his motivation is good, and number two, the result of what it leads to is good, it may in the middle look negative because that's just what's required. And if Krishna could circumvent it and not like they say, Krishna has all these cows, and so he tries to call them back firstly by calling their names. And then if they don't respond, then he blows his flute. He plays his flute. And if they don't respond, then he plays the buffalo horn. And if they don't respond, then he gets the stick out and he starts chasing them. So it's not like, you know what I mean? Like it's getting progressively more, you can see.
Heavy.
Yeah, heavy. It's getting heavy. Yeah, right. Like we say, the first class person, I don't know if this is a Prabhupada story, but someone told me like, Krishna is coming in front of you like this. And Krishna is putting out his hands and saying, come to the spiritual world. But if we don't listen, then what Krishna does is he goes around the back and he gives you a big kick. So the result of them is the same, but it's like, what way do you want to end up going, you know? So yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, ultimately Krishna is all good. But I think my sense is that if Krishna could avoid having to send us all these things, he probably would. And in that sense, we can say these are bad things that Krishna doesn't want to send us, but he does for an ultimate good.
Yeah, that was a beautiful answer, Maharaj. Thank you so much. You know, when you, I just wanted to share this one little thing, because when you talked about the cows, it reminded me of a sweet story. I heard that some of those cows who were like recalcitrant and not, you know, responding to Krishna, it's because they want that personal attention from Krishna. So they come, so they
wanted to be
get
chased
them personally. They want Krishna to come and get them personally. That's why they don't respond. That's what I heard in one lecture.
Interesting. Thank you.
Just one last follow-up, Maharaj, is about Govinda Prabhu's question about forgiveness. And I mean, this is, you know, way above my realization, but one thing that I've heard is that, you know, we are never victims, right? We are never victims. So this word forgiveness, I feel like it kind of fosters that kind of victim mentality. When the truth is that everything that happens to us is the Paramatma's response to our consciousness and comes to us for the sake of our rectification. Things don't happen to us unless we did something to warrant that experience for the sake of the rectification of our consciousness. So the people who are the perpetrators in our lives, they are merely instruments, but we are actually the original cause of, you know, the quote unquote crimes that are perpetrated against us. And so I feel like if we can look at the quote unquote injustices that we have been subjected to from that perspective, understanding that it is my own consciousness that attracted that, and the other person is just, you know, Krishna's instrument for, you know, bringing me the reaction that my consciousness attracted. seeing ourselves as the problem, basically, more than the other person, I feel like that might aid the forgiveness process. Like I said, that's way above pay grade.
Yeah, that's high. That is high. I mean, but what you're saying is it's there in the Bhagavatam, because when the bull is, is injured and Parikshit asks, who did this to you? Then the bull Dharma makes that statement. The Dharma says that if I identify the perpetrators of this as the cause of my misery, then I'm going to get the same reaction as them.
Exactly.
So what you're saying is there in the Bhagavatam, and as you said, it's very, very high. In one sense, what do we have to forgive? Because what you're saying is that everything is coming to us. It's not random. It's connected to something we need to go through. So, and others are just the messengers of that karma. Yeah, that's the highest understanding. Although the Bhagavatam does also use the word forgiveness, like a symptom of bhava is forgiveness, right? Shantir avyartha kalatvam, an extreme level of forgiveness. But I would sense in the sense of a pure devotee, Prabhupada says this, like Haridas Thakur, like he said that the pure devotee forgives before the crime has even been created. So to me, that sounds like when we're talking about forgiveness, although we're kind of framing it that this person did something and I forgive them for it, I think forgiveness really means to understand that I needed to go through this, and I accept that. I think that's what real forgiveness is. It's not really about the other person, because as you said, they're just the messengers. So. Yes, yeah. So
Hare Krishna, thank you so much, Maharaj. We have two hands up, Maharaj. I think you are in the UK, right?
I am in the UK,
but
yeah, I guess I'll have to wrap up in 5 minutes because.
In 5 minutes,
yeah.
Okay. All right, I had something to say, but I will give up on my question. Will go to Jana Vatsala. Jana, please unmute.
Hare Krishna, Maharaj, and Hare Krishna to all the devotees.
Hare Krishna. Can you turn on your camera, please? Is it possible?
Let me see if it's possible.
Lucky. Giriraj Maharaj will say, turn on your camera so we can see your lotus faces.
Hare
Okay.
Krishna.
Good.
Hare
Yeah,
Krishna.
One moment.
All right, if your camera is giving you troubles, just go ahead and speak.
Okay. So I had a few things, and I see that we're almost out of time. So
Okay.
One of them is too big of a pot that I will not open, and unless I want to leave it with people to think about. But thank you, everyone. And whenever Govinda Prabhu mentioned, let's see, the question about negativity, immediately my mind was trying to define what is negative, right? Like, yeah, like what's the definition for that? And I had been researching value recently, and I had a paper overview of the Swartz theory of basic values from college, and it differentiates how values relate to attitudes, beliefs, traits, and norms to find, like, yeah, how you can differ each of those definitions. And one sentence there said, there's a few sentences just might summarize my point. When trying to explain why individuals behave as they do, people often refer to attitudes, beliefs, traits, or norms. A crucial way in each which a crucial way in which each of these concepts differ from values is that it varies on another scale. It's measured differently. I didn't want to read that part. So attitudes are evaluations of objects as good or bad, desirable or undesirable. Attitudes can evaluate people, behaviors, events, or any object. And they vary on a positive and negative scale. So basically, when we say something negative, it's coming from attitudes, and values underlie our attitudes. They're the basis for our evaluation. So basically, I had highlighted this quote after that. We evaluate people, behaviors, events positively if they promote or protect attainment of the goals we value. We evaluate them negatively if they hinder or threaten attainment of these valued goals. So basically, negative, that word comes from like when like an attitude comes up that's like based on like a divorce from our values. So I feel like when we talk about what's negative, it's seeing Krishna there is like seeing how that negative item is showing a divorce from values, like spiritual values. Say like kind of like how this world is a mirror, a perverted reflection of the spiritual world. So I feel like what's happening is like we're seeing, oh, there's an absence of something I value. Hope I expressed that right. I think that's what I was
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I mean, just today's conversation has really got me thinking, those 2 points about what is actually a bad thing, and why we label things as bad, and how relevant that is to label things as negative things. And I'm going to think more about that. And the second point on forgiveness, and in what sense do devotees forgive? If in the highest sense we understand that everything that happens is coming from Krishna for my betterment. So yeah, I'm sorry we caught you right on the end of the call, and you've opened up something that we could be talking about a lot more, but I guess in the next session we can.